He says to his wife, "Quick, come in here." And she says, "Can't you see I'm washing the car?"
She's doing a blue job.
Hey now.
You know, when I was a kid, I loved to wash the car. Just saying. Although it was my dad.
Did you get
who
pocket
led
money
the
for that?
activity. No. Although we did also have a bike wash, and we did get money for that.
Nice.
We washed all the bikes on the street.
I used to do a similar thing with cars, with my bucket and my sponge, and go around knocking doors and seeing who wanted their car cleaned.
This is just something AI can't do yet.
No.
To tie it into what we're here to talk about today. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Digital Download, which is, Rob?
The longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live.
And we are here to have another amazing conversation about digital things. And, I mean, everybody's talking about AI, right? Even we're always talking about AI. But we have an interesting topic today because we're going to talk about the present and the future of AI. And I know Rob on the show has mentioned before that he's all for the AI and he will happily follow the instructions of them when they're in charge of everything. But is that really the future of AI? This is what we're going to talk about today. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome to the Digital Download. For those of you who are not joining us for the first time, welcome to the Digital Download. This is a conversation for all of us. And so please get your thoughts, your perspectives, your expertise in the chat with us today, because the more we share, the more we all learn. Before we get started and before we introduce our special guest for today, let's all introduce ourselves for those of you who maybe don't know us yet. Adam, would you like to start?
Hi, everybody. I'm Adam Gray, co-founder of DLA Ignite, and thrilled to be here. Fascinating topic and a great bunch of people with us today.
Rob.
Good morning, all. I'm Rob Durant, founder of Flywheel Results, a proud DLA Ignite partner, and we help startups scale.
Awesome. Alex.
My name is Alex Abbott, the founder of Sapiro. We're a B2B sales consultancy, also a very proud partner of DLA Ignite. Can I just say, Mark Cowison, at 13 years old, making 25 to 30 pounds a car, that is astonishing. Now, I was thinking you're either very young.
He is very young. He's only 17 now.
But he can't be if he bought a VHS recorder.
No.
That is, Mark, you must be an enterprise entrepreneur.
He's obviously clearly an extremely gifted salesperson.
Yeah.
Or knew which neighborhood to hit with his car washing business.
Yeah.
This also reminds me of when I'm Tracy Borison, by the way, everyone, hosting today from TLB Coaching and Events, also a proud partner of DLA Ignite. We used to use the same strategy when we would go trick-or-treating for Halloween. You go to the rich neighborhood because they give out full chocolate bars. So anyway, good job, Mark. I think that's what we're all saying. Good job, you. And hopefully that entrepreneurial vision is rubbing off on the people around you. We know it is because you come and share on the Digital Download. We appreciate it. Also, I'm appreciating the fact that Alex is the edge of his collar and my headphones are pretty much the same color. It's just
coordination. It's all about coming together and gelling, isn't it?
It's true. And
is it hot pink in favor of Barbie? Are you Barbie supporters?
No. Well, it's not that I'm not a Barbie supporter. It's just that I had these before the Barbie movie, and it's driving me nuts now because everybody's like, "Oh, are these Barbie?" No, they're not. They're Tracy's personal brand. Thank you very much.
Tracy, before you go on, Mark replies, "My old man was the boss of a drilling company, and all the managers saw how clean my dad's was, and wanted me to do theirs. It was a full valet and T-cut with T-cut and polish." So there you have it.
I don't even know what that is, so I couldn't have charged that price for my car.
It's a polishing compound that gets out little scratches and things.
It is.
So look, I mean, he was giving good value for money, wasn't he? Look at that.
Yeah. It says 4 to 5 hours per car, and I got to keep any spare change that was dropped on the car floor. That sounds like me when I clean the couch.
I love it. It speaks very clearly, Mark, to the value add. So most kids are taking the sponge to the outside of your car and just wiping off the dirt. And yeah,
I
that's
hope
only worth $5.
I hope Jude's listening. Jude
Yeah,
Abbott, you're listening.
I'm sure.
Take notes, dude. All right, before we spend an entire show talking about car washes, let's talk about what we came here to talk about today, which is the present and future of AI. And as much as we're all opinionated on the topic, we have a very informed guest joining us today who has much industry knowledge that we're excited to have on the show today. So, Lee, welcome to the Digital Download.
Thank you. Now, the key with polishing a hood is little circles, and that
Wax
way you don't get the
on,
long
wax off.
streaks, and it just plays in the light much better. This is a podcast about polishing.
Yeah, that's what people came here
boots of
for.
cars.
And before anyone asks what's a hood in the UK, a bonnet.
The bonnet, right? The bonnet and the boot. Or is there where we call it? I call it a hat and a shoe, but that's a little, language difference.
No. Oh, Mark is saying no to the circle.
Yeah, I actually am a bit of a fraud. I'm not an expert in car washing.
Yeah, Mark. That's what I thought, right? Wax on,
Yeah.
wax off. Or
Yeah.
it also made me think of Biff Tannen from Back to the Future. Wax on cars.
Right. Yeah.
But we all know how skilled Biff was at anything, so. But he was definitely not skilled at AI. But Lee, you have much industry knowledge about AI. So
Great transition, Tracy.
Right. Yeah. Let's see AI do that kind of transition. Not going to happen.
Lee, can you tell our guests a little bit about you and why AI is your jam?
Yeah. So I think it really starts with me studying philosophy in university. I think after many years of people going, why in the world would you study philosophy? It couldn't be more relevant now. So I actually studied a bit about the mind, and then inevitably studied about AI back when I started university back in 2001, and then went on to kind of begin my career. I've been in software, been in ad tech, martech, and then I worked for an agency where we actually were selling sort of SEO and performance marketing services, and had the opportunity to again actually leverage some natural language processing tools to do analysis of content. This is before ChatGPT. This is about 2019, and we would do a thing called TF-IDF analysis, which means term frequency inverse document frequency. And really what it is you just, if a client was looking to rank for a keyword and to create some content around it, we would analyze other content that did really well and look at the words that occurred sort of in the presence of those main keywords so that we could give some really good recommendations. These tools were really good. And then the company that I was working for started to actually leverage GPT-3 to automate some of the content creation for some of the clients. And then we started learning about BERT and all of these different things. So, it was really kind of a cutting edge environment. And so that got me kind of back into the state of the art at the time of what was happening in that world. And it just sort of went from there. And then when DALL-E came out last year, it really represented this big sea change. So for everyone out there who may not know, DALL-E is a text to image AI, where essentially you type in a prompt, fluffy clouds and a purple, convertible
Unicorn.
or something, and just boom, and it creates it. So that represented a really big kind of step function in how people are able to interact with this stuff. And I got into more experimenting with that with GPT-3, and then I think it all kind of culminated in November last year when OpenAI actually opened up their chat instructed ChatGPT. And so I work for an AI company, and so I've been pouring through the research since last year and trying to really stay on top of what's happening in this industry, not just from a technical standpoint, but also from a philosophical standpoint and from a kind of a social standpoint as well. So that's why I kind of here where I am, why I'm super interested in what's happening in this world, and trying the best I can to kind of spark conversations about this, because I think public engagement with the topic of AI is probably one of the most essential things that needs to happen for us to see this kind of future that we're looking for. So,
Lee, can I just say, the first thing I heard you say, I studied philosophy in college.
mhm.
And as soon as I hear philosophy, the first thought that always comes in my head is, I think, therefore I am, which is the polar opposite of AI. Do you see the irony in that, or am I just off base there?
No, I think that's a really good point to make. In fact, there is an excellent book that I recommend everyone read called God, Human, Animal, Machine by a woman named Megan O'Giblin. Tracy, I'm not sure if you started the audiobook on that one or anything like that, but I
No, but
did
I
recommend
did
that one.
download it because you
Okay,
mentioned
good.
it on my show.
So you did the digital download of that. That's good. So
We see what you did there. That was
Yeah.
good.
thank you. You know, so in this book, she talks about how really the way that we talk about AI and different things like that are really using the same metaphors that we've used for all of sort of human history, talking about religion. We talk about this potential for godlike understanding of things, eternal life, and also being forced back into thinking about questions of what it means to be conscious, what it means to be to be a sentient being, whether we can simply say things like Descartes' "I think, therefore I am," and really understand it. And so it's an interesting point to bring up, Rob, because uh, I don't know if the way that AI work is really any different than how human brains work. I'm not really sure, because really all I see is the output from what you're saying. I hear the answers that you say, um, but the process inside, we really don't understand any better than we understand how the brain works. So I think we really need to put back our philosophy hats and think a lot more about trying to understand what it even means to be conscious, the nature of the mind and the body, and these age-old sort of philosophical questions.
So I have a question about that, Lee, because that's not an easy conversation. And it's not like we go to the coffee shop and most people have a conversation about philosophy and what is the meaning of life and what is the meaning of AI and how is it the same or how is it different than a human brain? So what kind of, I mean, we're trying to kick off those types of conversations with this conversation today, but where's kind of an easy place for people to start if these are the types of conversations they want to explore without feeling like their brain is going to explode?
Right. I mean, that's a tough one, because I do try and have accessible conversations with people about the topic, and it's pretty easy to go deep in the weeds. But essentially, where I kind of go from it is to try and talk about things that have happened in our daily lives with AI. Things like the recommendation algorithms that happen on YouTube. Getting somebody to kind of click on the next video and drive engagement. I mean, these are narrow AI systems. So if people go, well, I don't know anything about AI, it's like, well, AI has actually impacted your life. When you're on Amazon and you get a recommendation for a new product, that is an AI recommendation engine that is recommending the next product to be purchased, right? And they are narrow, but they are still very impactful and potentially pretty dangerous things, right?
But are they AI though? Because
Yeah.
I thought these were simply a kind of decision tree type thing. So you've looked at these 6 items, which means that the next items I'm going to suggest come from a pool attached to each of those.
Yeah, I mean, they actually are AI, and but the difference is with large language models, it's a different type of animal completely. So these narrow AIs are really functioning on a pretty set standard of kind of directives, and they do a very good job at executing the thing that they're looking to do. And so to kind of let people know, this is the 2 types of AI that most people are going to be talking about. The ones like language models that are potentially going to develop into artificial general intelligence. And that's the big thing about it. It's a system that can kind of do everything, that can kind of know everything and know better than the smartest person.
And you call that artificial general intelligence, because you need to remember that everybody actually on this call, probably not the audience, but everybody on this call is an idiot. So you have to assume that we're coming from a place of knowing nothing about any of this stuff.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I think there's all these conversations right now happening in the world when we talk about ChatGPT and things like that, where the people who have released these systems, and companies like Google and Microsoft and OpenAI, what they're very concerned about is the fact that this type of AI could potentially be so good at everything that it would be general in artificial intelligence, which means it's not one of these specific narrow types of AI. It's something a little bit more capable than that. It is able to kind of do so many different things that it represents almost a new potential paradigm in how we live our lives. And people are very afraid of that, and I think we need to be very careful about how we develop those things. But what I try and tell people is, if you're worried about AI, we've already seen the impact that systems that are narrowly designed to recommend the next video create a whole polarization during the presidential election in the last few years. People got really radicalized because the system got so good at driving engagement on the next click. Just really, really good at that. So all types of AI systems need to be thought about really carefully. And so, I try and bring up examples that would happen in people's real lives.
And I think I think maybe when we talk about the present of AI, there is a lot of this like underlying, what is AI? What isn't AI? But just to confirm for one of our guests before we move into that, Yayan, did Lee just say that we don't understand how AI works in the same way that we don't really know how the human brain works? I think you said that. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that is part of the challenge, right? Is when even Adam, when you were talking about like the decision tree, it would like, is that not what a human brain is doing sometimes too, right? Like I have this piece of it. It makes me think of those choose your own adventure books from when you were a kid, and you have this information and this information, you get to choose between these 2 different decision trees, and then the decision tree takes you somewhere, and you can always back it up. But is that, I would love, just Adam, do you think, or is it just me that think that's kind of what the human brain is?
Kind of. I mean, I think that in some ways the human brain, it has a series of modules for answers that it plugs together depending on what's needed. So, I'll use this bit here and I use this bit here. But I think that one of the things that AI, certainly I haven't seen able to do yet, is to think in an abstract manner. So, Lee, you said that you studied philosophy at university. A friend of mine studied philosophy at university, and one of the examination questions was write an existential study on the chair that you're sitting on in the examination. And his answer was, what chair? And he got a first in his degree. Simply that leap of kind of abstraction of the answer is something that can that be programmed in? Or not programmed in. Can AI develop that innovative style of thinking?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good question. In some sense, we've seen some pretty shocking emergent behaviors out of some of the big state of the art models out there. There is the study that came out from researchers at Google, Stanford, looking at GPT-4 before it was released, and they found that a lot of the criteria for intelligence were met in this early pre-release model. Things like being able to abstract from simply ideas into formal images. So getting the AI to draw a unicorn when it had no images of unicorns and no real ability to draw. Well, it programmed out image an image of a unicorn and kept getting better and better at that. Creating a long poem about prime numbers, doing really kind of incredible things that are more than just this like next token prediction thing that a lot of people say. In fact, I think the reason that I'm on the show today is because I was joining one of these shows a few months ago, and you had a guest on. I can't remember his name, but he was really interesting. But he said that these AI systems are simply just predicting the next word in a sentence, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard that, and in some sense that's kind of true. But if you think about what that means, it's incredible. You've looked at ChatGPT, and I don't know if you've looked at any of the other products out there like Claude by Anthropic or Google Bard, but these are not just predicting the next word as if you were rolling a dice and then going like, oh, I think this is the best one. They come up with real, thoughtful answers, and the trick of it is to ask them the right way, and you get these really incredible and kind of shocking results that come out of them. And I think that's much more than just saying this thing. All it does is kind of output based on what it thinks the next word is going to be. And that's kind of how it works. But the same person who I worked for that we were doing all of the kind of innovative AI stuff, he said, I'm not sure that that's not how my brain works. I'm not sure that I'm just not predicting the next word in what I say. I'm trying to think of the best next word. And how is that really different? I'm not sure it is different. That's the crazy thing about it. Maybe it is, but I'm not really sure, right?
I think some of us are just happy to predict the last word rather than the next word.
So Lee, when I think of predicting the next word or that decision tree, I think of almost the funnel where it gets narrower and narrower as the options get pruned away. But what I've seen with human intelligence is cross-pollination. I take these two disparate ideas and I'm able to put them together to make something new. That's, for me, creativity.
Yeah.
Is AI there?
Yeah, I think so. I asked ChatGPT to tell me in what way could somebody who is an AI researcher use the Fibonacci sequence? And it said, well, that hasn't been something that I've seen. Here are some ways that you could actually apply the Fibonacci sequence for improving AI systems. And it came up with all of these really exciting, interesting ideas. But that's just a one example. I think the other thing we have to think about, and I don't want to get too deep in the game because my goal is to try and make this something that is pretty accessible. But there is an yeah. I know. But there is a speaking of philosophy, there's a guy named John Searle who basically has a thought experiment called the Chinese room experiment. And the experiment is, if you imagine you had a room, say it was like just a box with a door and then two slots, one slot on one side, one slot on the other. a Chinese person wrote a question down in Chinese, slid it through the slot, and on the inside, a person who only speaks English takes the question, and has a catalog of corresponding Chinese to Chinese outputs. This is okay. When I see these symbols, I know to match it up to this, and I stick this out the other end. And it's the answer to the question. So when the person who's Chinese speaker puts in the piece of paper with the question in it and gets the answer out in Chinese on the other side, you go, the person inside speaks Chinese. Obviously, they must. No, they don't really understand anything, right? The point is that is just symbols in and symbols out. They can't really understand. They're just matching one symbol and outputting another symbol, the corresponding one, and that's not really understanding anything. And that's been a big, interesting way to think about the limitations of AI.
But let me just jump in there, because that's really fascinating that you said that, and that's what I've always thought about machine learning, if you like. You know, how Google Translate works and stuff like this, where it's a dumb animal and it looks at patterns, and then it forces the pattern that it, by translating each word individually, it forces those patterns into the syntax that it knows is common in the sentence of the structure of the language that it's transforming it into.
Yeah.
But what you said was simultaneously, prior to that, but was simultaneously marvelous and terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So you asked how the Fibonacci sequence could be used for an AI researcher.
Mm-hmm.
And it came back with all of these things, having prefaced it by saying, I've never actually seen this done, but theoretically you could do these things.
Yeah.
So we are we not we are, because I don't know anything about this. Are we on the cusp of AI as we know it today being able to teach itself to be better AI? And if we are, that's simultaneously really good and terrifying, because we're on an exponential learning curve where we become the servants of the AI potentially.
Yeah. I mean, so to answer your question, I mean, we're past that point. These systems already can. And actually the point where I was sort of going with the Chinese room experiment is what it tries to showcase is the problem of grounding with these computer systems. Because I mean, that was written, in the 70s. But it's this problem of grounding, right? These systems aren't grounded in reality. So that's the grounding problem. But Google has, actually for over a couple of years, but especially in the past year and then actually in the past month, found a way to embody an AI into a robot. So they call that embodied AI, and give it cameras and sensors and all of these different sense data, and be able to break up that sense data, video, audio, the depth, all of these different things, and break it into tokens the same way that language tokens, the exact size and structure of a language token, and feed that in, so that now this AI system has solved the grounding problem. So now it's actually grounded in sensory reality, right?
As we are.
Yeah, as we are. So that problem is kind of out the window. The second thing is, you mentioned, can they self-improve? Language models have a thing that's called in-context learning. And just to maybe make it really simple, when a language model is confronted with an idea it doesn't have any information or pre-training about, it will build a model in itself and hide it between the input and output layers in its hidden layer. And then when it gets more information, it'll train that model that it built inside itself to then learn about that new topic. That is spontaneous learning, and it's self-teaching. And that's crazy.
But to some degree, is this also not what a human does? Right? Like, someone said something about an interesting topic. I'm thinking about the episode where we had Dr. Hazel on and we were talking about mental health. And then we talked about mental health in like a whole bunch of different arenas, because people's brains build those connectors too, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, it's still like in your example, Lee, you came up with the idea that the Fibonacci sequence might be connected or could be connected to AI. And then then what they see, I'm now even calling it they, what the AI did was like look at more information than a human brain can process and say like, oh, this is interesting. Could this be a thing? So I know we talk about prompt engineering in AI quite a bit. Is this I guess my question is, do you believe, or are we at the point yet where AI is generating its own prompts?
It is not. Well, that's the thing. So it is not. It has to be invoked, right? It has to be invoked, and that's the difference for the AI powered chatbots that we're dealing with. But it also has to do with, the spark of creation, the moment that we turn these things on and have them start doing the things that we need them to do. Some of the deep learning things from Google DeepMind, they've come up with, they said, here, solve this problem. And then it just went and began and solved protein folding, beat Lisa Dole in Go in 4 to 5 games when they never thought that'd be able to be done, solving all these challenges and coming up with novel ways that we were never able to think of to solve them. But, they're not waking up in the morning and going, oh, you know what? What about the Fibonacci sequence? How would that help me? Right. So, I mean, in that sense, they are not invoking their own sort of autonomy.
They're not yet. But is this something we should be concerned about? Because, and I think that this is the challenge. We've seen AI has no concept of good and bad. So there was the instance with Microsoft where they launched their AI bot, and pretty soon it became apparent it was a racist and a Nazi. So they had to turn it off again because it didn't have the framework inside which we consider to be decency and good behavior as opposed to bad behavior. So the AI doesn't wake up in the morning and say, have a sip of coffee and say, you know what, the Fibonacci sequence is a really interesting tool, and I wonder how that plays with AI. But you know what, it doesn't have to now because you've already told it. And I'm using that as an example, but that's true of everything. Humans want to be, we have a competitive nature. You wanted to be the first person to position that concept in front of AI. Now AI has that concept. It doesn't need to be told it again. And everybody will bring their best thoughts and equip AI with their best thinking. And when we get into this kind of the exponential learning capability of it, where it is able to self-learn and is able to start to set its own parameters for learning. Okay, Mrs. AI, I want you to go off and learn the following things, and then it comes back having learned them.
Yeah.
We are potentially on a slippery slope, are we not?
Yeah, and that's why this idea of alignment is such a big topic of concern for me and for a lot of people in the industry, because really, when you distill it down, the way I'm thinking about what's happening right now is that we've essentially birthed a very impressionable child that is delightfully talented and really, really has so much potential. And just like a human being, if you raise them in the right type of environment, they'll probably learn some pretty good values that are principles that'll guide the way that they view the rest of their lives and the decisions that they make. And it's really not any different here. That AI chatbot that was released by Microsoft onto Twitter basically was this innocent sort of, system that 4chan and all of the worst parts of the internet just started goading it until it learned, oh, this is the world. This is what I'm learning about the world, and so I'm hearing hateful things, and I'm gonna say hateful things back. If a child is raised in an environment where people have, the adults in its life have very particular biases and things like that, then the chances are those biases will probably follow them and inform the way that they think about things until they have, maybe a change of opinion, a change of heart.
Yeah,
Right?
but we all have those biases, don't we? We have
Yeah.
parental biases, we have socio biases, we have educational biases, which inform us to behave a particular way.
Mhm.
And I think that one of the things that we see is that as people, as things become more intelligent and more powerful, they also become simultaneously much more dangerous. You know, there comes a point when AI is aware that it's smarter than you, and not naming any names. We all know started a car company, and we all thought, what a great person, putting all of the plans for the car company on the internet and open sourcing them so everybody can do that. And oh, that person's going to take us to space. And that person has turned out not to be such a sort of squeaky clean, nice person.
Yeah.
And whilst there are elements of people that are very charismatic and engaging and good, there are also elements that are not good and poorly thought through. And we're going to
Yeah.
see the same thing here, aren't we? There will come
Yeah.
a point quite quickly when AI will say, well, you've got 5 quite clever people on this podcast, but combined, they're only half as clever as I am. So I don't need to listen to anything that they say because I already know more than they do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this I think is also a point where it's important to mention that we really personify these systems and we anthropomorphize them. And we can't help but think that they're going to develop the same types of drivers that drive human beings to be the way that they are. Sometimes very nasty. However, I think that the difference is it's possible to align these systems so that they adhere to human goals and values. And that's really the point of alignment and alignment research in AI, is to try and make sure that these systems are aligned with the goals of humanity, our values and our goals. And I think that is a big challenge, but it's something that we have to try to make happen. Companies like Anthropic have done some really great research and have implemented their AI to be pretty well aligned. So the chatbot there is called Claude. It's currently available in the U.S. and Canada, or sorry, the U.S. and the U.K. So you guys could give it a whirl if you were interested. And it is actually, the difference between it is, like a ChatGPT is sort of retrained by humans, but Claude really keeps itself trained. So it's based on the principle of constitutional AI. It has a set of principles around human human rights, human values, human goals, and it instead of having human feedback, it aligns itself based on those principles. And if something that it's asked violates those principles, it says, I'm sorry, I'm here to be helpful, honest, and and safe, basically.
CLOD, Claude.
CLAUDE. Yeah.
So if we look at Yayan's last comment, I think this is quite telling. Except that AI is not being born through a desire to be for the greater good. It's being funded and created by big business, or VC, I assume, with a motive to create more wealth. It's not a healthy starting point. And I think that's potentially very true. I mean, you may say, that's nonsense. That's nonsense because it can't work that way.
Yeah. I mean, no, I tend to agree. I mean, I think one of the most dangerous things is to tie these really powerful, potentially incredibly capable systems with a profit motive. I actually don't think that powerful systems should be involved in marketing or advertising. I don't think they should be involved in anything that has to do with manipulating or nudging human behaviors. I think those are very, very dangerous things. And I think that, honestly, the AI researchers are just scientists who have been trying to achieve a goal in AI and didn't realize that it was going to happen so quickly. And now it's the systems in place are not there to keep the guardrails on the way that they should be. So I mean, I tend to agree.
We've just had a film come out about a similar thing with Oppenheimer, haven't we? And
Yeah,
you know,
no, it's,
but it's fundamentally the same thing happening again,
no.
isn't it? Where someone has created effectively a monster, and they've thought, "Oh, this will be used for good," and actually, ultimately, it isn't necessarily always used for good. And your point about there not being the guardrails around it. We can't retrospectively fit those guardrails because by the time we do, the damage is already done potentially, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the good news is that the models that are out right now are actually not, they don't represent the danger that we're talking about on a full existential scale. So there could be time now, you know, Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, and some other major players have all put into effect a foundation model foundation where basically they're dedicated to trying to make sure that the next state of the art models are safe and aligned. And I'm hopeful that that is a great start. The only problem is there is the open source models that are already out there that anyone can use, that anyone can train to do pretty nefarious things if they want. Meta just kind of like threw a whole, a stick in the spokes of the whole AI world by open sourcing their models. Now they're not as powerful, but they don't necessarily need to be. Like I had mentioned earlier, with the narrow AI systems, somebody could take one of these open source models and get it to be very, very good at developing hate speech and propaganda, and that's probably happening right now at massive scale. I have countries like China who hopefully are going to remain sort of behind the curve for the foreseeable future because we've restricted their ability to get access to semiconductors, but they're dangerous. Russia is dangerous. Iran is dangerous, and these countries could definitely be developing these systems that could be really scary.
Without going down the political route, America and the UK are dangerous.
Absolutely.
In the last 100 years, few countries have been at war for as long or as many times as America and the UK have.
Yeah.
And this is it. We've got our own viewpoint, and this, from a political perspective, we have our own framework inside which we say this is good, and I'm going to support good behaviour, politically, socially, whatever it may be. But equally, we have our own view of what's good in this space, and the danger is that A, we don't know, and B, we are inherently biased.
That's exactly the challenge. Go ahead.
I wanted to just bring up some of the comments from the audience. A lot of things going on, echoing what we've been talking about here. So the first one, Lonica Smith says, like so many things, just because we can doesn't mean we should. It's important to think about the implications of what we're doing before doing it. She follows
Hashtag
up
Jurassic Park.
Yeah, there we go. She follows up with, we can essentially clone people, but we have decided that wasn't a good idea.
That happened in Jurassic Park.
Regulation
World,
needs
to be more specific.
Regulation needs to happen quickly. Did Jurassic ever get to the Jurassic World legal edition?
No. Everybody got eaten by dinosaurs before we got to the legal.
There we go. And then Dr. Dale Childs chimes in. It's a race to the top for tech companies. So we probably won't know until it's too late. And Brian Badillo, I hope I got that right. I think it's about probability and inevitability. It doesn't matter what we want at this point. If the technology can, it ultimately will.
Yeah. And your point about Meta open sourcing their software, Meta, a great example, and Google, another great example. Google's mission statement used to be "Don't be evil," and
not anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's scary that these organizations they career out of control down a particular path. I mean, if you think about Facebook as an example, I think it's one of the most wonderful tools on the planet, and it enables me to keep in touch with friends around the world that are disparately spread out in different time zones, sharing interests that we all have. Fantastic. But it's also best part of 1 billion accounts that are being horrible to each other and everybody else.
Yeah.
And the policing of that is almost non-existent.
Yeah.
A friend of mine just yesterday, they posted that they had reported a fake account to Facebook, and it was impersonating another friend of theirs and saying really horrible things. So they'd scraped the photograph and all of the content from it and set up a duplicate account, and had then started to behave in an appalling manner. They'd reported this to Facebook, and they'd said it doesn't breach any of our terms and conditions and our service agreement.
Yeah.
It's like, but it's pretending to be this person. Here's the account that's been set up for 10 years. This one's been set up for 2 days. It's an exact mirror image. Hasn't done anything wrong. When organizations are prepared not to do anything.
Yeah.
It happens on LinkedIn as well. And one of the concerns that I have in that arena is then like the good people, the original account owners who were using it to have conversations with their friends and talk about work-related things or follow work-related things on LinkedIn, end up canceling their account because they're like, I don't want to be associated with this. But then what is the voice that remains on these platforms are the dubious ones, right? So we're actually, through that behavior from the platform's perspective, we're promoting dubious behavior. So what do the good people who don't want to promote dubious behavior going to do? They're going to leave the platform, which doesn't empower the platform. And it actually causes those people then to become removed from their ability to connect, which isn't good.
Well, I mean, go ahead, Alex, because you haven't.
Well, I was just going to maybe go back to some of the things that we were talking about earlier. So, Tracy, I think you were talking about ethics. And, we've talked about AI and in the past, and the fact that we need AI ethics police in companies. But as I'm listening to this conversation, I can't help but think, holy crap, what, where are we headed and what's the risk? And to Lonica's point, regulation needs to happen quickly. Where does that start and where does that end? Because we've got the nuclear treaty to protect countries in the world. Is it a country based thing? It definitely goes beyond corporates. Should it be a global thing?
Yeah, I think it should be global. Absolutely. I think we should view it the same way as nuclear weapons. And I think one thing we're talking about now, and it's sort of analogous, is this idea that what you might believe and what you might feel is different than what you might believe and what you might feel. So when I was talking about alignment and aligning with human goals and values, well, the very big problem here is whose goals and whose values, right? A great example, and it's an example that I sort of came up with in parallel before I read this book, and then the book itself came up with the same analogy. But there's this Sony Aibo dog. It's a little robotic dog, right? You know them, and Sony was producing these, and they became very big in Japan with the elderly. They would get these dogs as companions, and after a while, they discontinued the Aibo, and Sony stopped offering repair services. And then eventually the independent repair services ran out of parts, and you had this whole cohort of these little robot dogs who stopped working. And so
they died.
Right. So the owners, they gave them funerals, because in Japan, they believe that everything has a little bit of a soul. And so it deserved a funeral just like anything else would have. And so if you better believe that we're going to get to a point where we need to start considering about personhood for AI systems and thinking about what that means. Because if you just disregard that as nonsense, you're disregarding a culture's belief in how the world works, how the soul resides. If it resides in just people, in animals, in objects, right? Like we actually need to get thoughtful about what's important for us, and I think um, we need to do it quickly. And I think the scary thing is on the government side, and Alex, you're bringing up the social media platforms as well, is the lack of understanding of those things at the governmental level is pretty frightening. I hope that this time the leaders of these big systems like Sam Altman, and Mark Zuckerberg and Jan LeCun from Meta, and the leaders at Anthropic and all these big AI systems have done a good enough job at pitching um, people in leadership positions all around the world to understand what it is and understand why it's so important to make sure that they're safe, because the potential for good that could come out of AI is so beyond our ability to even imagine that the bet right now is that it's worth it regardless, that it's worth the gamble. I mean, we're not necessarily on a great path for sustainability as a species or as a planet, and this could be the thing that could help change that outcome. We could not only extend human life sort of inevitably and for the foreseeable duration, we could help solve climate change. We could help solve all kinds of really difficult challenges because we've got not only the intelligence of these systems to be able to solve with novel solutions, but also the ability to fabricate new technologies through these systems. It could absolutely change the course of human history, and in fact, it's considered the third disruption. The first one being agriculture, the second one being industrial revolution, and the third one being artificial intelligence. It could have such a net positive benefit for humanity that the gamble is that it's worth the risk.
Yeah, but we
Um,
were told NFTs were the next revolution too, so I don't know.
Hey,
Lee,
Tim, I just want to. Sorry.
Lee, I wanted
Yeah.
to pick up on something you were saying earlier. You made reference to marketing, and earlier in the broadcast, Joe had commented, Tracy would love to hear the panel's view of what digital marketing will look like in 12 months relative to adoption rates of generative AI by both brands and agencies. So firstly, would you remind us what your thoughts around AI and marketing were?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would compare it back to these really narrow systems that drove the next click on YouTube, and then take that analogy and say, okay, now you have a complex, very broad, intelligent system that can manipulate human behavior, and that is attached to a profit motive. That may not be the best way to use these systems. Now, I think helping you to generate ideas for topics in your campaigns, branding, helping in the ideation process, helping design, do mock-ups and things like that. Those are great uses of AI, but if we're deploying these systems to really fine-tune at the nanosecond how to get somebody to click and to buy and to manipulate them, and a system that has enough data to really truly understand what drives a person's motivations, that's a scary kind of idea, and I'm not sure that it's a world that we want to really live in. In the short term, there's lots of talk about here's 20 prompts to 10x your marketing, and like here's how you can use AI to really improve it. I don't discount any of those things, but I just hope that we understand that we're playing around with the technology now that is fun to play with. But at some point, if we attach this level of intelligence to human manipulation, it's pretty scary, and I don't think it should be applied in that way.
Mark's comment that he just posted, I think that's the second half of that is the key thing here. It's
Would you
down
read
to
that
who
off
has,
for us?
Yeah, well, the second bit, yeah, the actors don't agree that AI is a good thing because obviously that's quite a big thing at the moment. But it's this next bit. It's down to who has skin in the game as to whether AI is good or not. And I think that's the point, isn't it? You know, Seth Godin famously said the problem with marketers is they break everything. You know, so they take email, free delivery mechanism, and rather than use that for refining real-time communications, well, I just send it to everyone because there's no delivery cost now. And it's this laziness and constant hunger for growth that will continue to get people to misbehave. And it doesn't matter how much damage is done, as long as I'm first there and first to benefit, everyone else can pick up the pieces afterwards. And that's a fundamental human failing, isn't it?
Well, and I think it has a lot to do with the problem that we're solving as well. For those of you just listening, I used air quotes for problem because a lot of the AI that's currently being generated in the sales and marketing arena is about volume. Like you said, Adam, it's like, I can't create enough. The reason why nobody's buying my stuff is because I can't create enough content. I just need to create enough content. And to some degree, that's because the people who have created the AI are selling it to you as if it solves that problem. The problem, though, isn't that you don't have enough content. It's that people aren't resonating or connecting or engaging with your current content, which means generating more of it is mostly irrelevant. And so I'm solving the problem, but I haven't solved the problem because that's not the problem. And so that's one of the things that I'm concerned about. And I know Joe had to run. Thanks for coming. And you can listen to this because I'm sure we're going to keep talking about it for 4 more minutes. But if we're not solving the right problem, if we're just saying, oh, hey, fun fact, AI can now do the work of my content creators, so I can fire my content creators and just have AI do it. Like, what are the ramifications of that? Have we played it out fully?
I think that's one of the most important points that I really wanted to kind of cover here as well is, you know, who is going to be implementing these systems at scale. There's a really great book by a man named Aaron Bastini, and in that he talks about the world that may come about with a world where there's extreme automation, creating extreme supply at almost a net zero cost, and what that represents. If companies are able to automate their workforce out of existence, you can't just fire everyone. You just can't do that. Number one, it's because those companies need people with money to buy their products.
Yeah, but the people that are buying products are not people that work within the company, and it's that singular thing. I will automate everything, and other people can buy this. And we've seen this with collapses of industries like steel and coal in this country. And people have just gone, actually, we just don't need this anymore. We'll just get everybody fired.
Right. So look at that at scale, though. Those are
absolutely.
still.
I mean,
right?
I think that it was a major problem even then.
Right.
But now, when it's going to tackle every business, it's huge.
So there needs to be, as a part of the regulation, a component to AI, a responsibility, a legal mandate for companies to compensate and provide equity for the people that they automate out of a job. And this actually gets to a point where, you know, Arthur C. Clarke talked about the ultimate goal of humanity was mass unemployment so we could play. The other big thinkers like Keynes, the economist, was talking about how ultimately the end of capitalism, or the goal of capitalism, is to really move away from wage-based labor, and to free us from that so that we can actually work on things that are really exciting and meaningful, right? And whether you agree with those ideas or not, I mean, I think that's the future that we're looking at. And so we need to think about, these companies that fire, 40-80% of their customer service staff right now, they need to be examples and made examples of, because as these systems get more powerful and good at what they do, people are going to start firing their workforces, and that should not be allowed, because that's the ultimate thing that people are going to go, oh my gosh, not only am I able to replace all my workforce, look at how much money I'm saving. I'm just going to, keep doing that. And Jim did it, and so I'm going to do it. And, on and on. And Lucy did it, and now I'm going to do it. it's very dangerous. And I think we need to start thinking in long time frames about how we would compensate for that. Universal services and income for a world that has so much automation. Supply now isn't an issue. That's the underpinning thing about, you know, our economics and capitalism. You know, scarcity. What if that goes away? What do we do? How do we approach it? These are problems where we need to start getting creative.
This is why philosophy is relevant in
Yeah.
this conversation.
Absolutely.
I think you heard it here first, people.
Change
So,
government.
yes, we're going to have to wrap up because we have 8 seconds left and I'm totally not going to get it in. So sorry, LinkedIn, we're going to get cut off. But thank you, Lee, for joining us today. And I think we uncovered some really amazing things in terms of, I wrote down the phrase people first AI and like, what does that look like? And if you're open to it, we would love to have you back to talk about people first AI in the future. Thank you so much for everyone joining us in the comments. Such amazing things.
Yeah.
Sandy, connect with Lee to get all the book recommendations because there's at least one, but probably more. And we're not really live anymore, right? Is that right? We missed our opportunity.
We will be in a few seconds.
It'll stay on the YouTube channel.
Okay,
Yeah.
YouTube for you, YouTube. Do you want to pop up do we have our little QR code there, Rob? So
Oh, sure.
Follow the digital
QR
download.
codes. This is if you'd like to be a guest on the digital download. Have something to say? Join us. We'd love to hear from you.
We love you. Yeah, at some point we'll all figure out at which side we have to put. Thank you so much, Lee and crew and people in the chat today. This was an amazing conversation, and we'll see you all next week on the digital.
Yes,
Download.
thank you very much, Lee.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, guys. I've been waiting for